Warning: this video contains spoilers for Wings of Fire Book 1, Wings of Fire Book 5, and Wings of Fire Book 8. If you haven't yet read these books and don't want spoilers for them, consider leaving this video now. Hi everyone! Today we will be looking into an interesting topic: Firescales dragons, or rather, if it is possible, and if so, how to defeat them. In the series, Firescales dragons, namely Peril, are known and feared across Pyria for being invulnerable killing machines. For example, when Thorn's outclaws temporarily take the famed Sandwing stronghold in the brightest night to free Sunny, Peril kind of randomly shows up, and the frightened Sandwings become paralyzed by fear. No one dares move, not even to fight their enemies. Another example of how renowned Peril and her kind are is in Escaping Peril, where this may be a slight exaggeration, but pretty much the entire Sky Kingdom surrenders to Scarlet at the very sight of Peril deciding to back her claim. So, what are Firescales anyway? Firescales are most likely a mutation of the Skywing genome that gives their scales immense heat, enough to burn someone alive. Firescales dragons can't even take a step without completely crisping and killing all the plants in the immediate area. Even Foeslayer, 2,000 years after her last encounter with the outside world, recalls and is quite frightened by Firescales, and all of this fear wasn't without adequate cause, either. We have seen both Winter and Horizon that Firescales can completely burn a dragon in mere seconds. Peril is said to have killed hive loads of dragons in Scarlet's arena, or is it the Skywing arena? I'm not really exactly certain when it was built, so there's no way to tell. If anyone knows, please let me know in the comments. Anyway, back to the topic of Firescales dragons. How hot are Firescales? While there is no standard measurement units for temperature in Wings of Fire, there are ways to estimate the temperature of a Firescales dragon's scales, based on what we've seen Peril do. However, note that this is entirely possible that other Firescales dragons have different scale temperatures, and we have no evidence of this, so I'll just use Peril as a reference for all dragons that have Firescales powers. Anyway, it takes around 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 1650 Celsius, to turn a human to ash. Though Firescales are very immensely hot, they have never turned anything aside from a few eggs to ashes, and though humans and dragons have different bodies, this leads me to estimate that Firescales are no more than 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. I almost said Celsius, which is about 1,500 Celsius. Testing things against Firescales temperature. Next, we will take a look at what materials can resist Firescales temperature. I will be going over various stones and metals, but only ones that would have been available to Wings of Fire grade dragon technology. This means that ultra heat-resistant metals like palladium, platinum, titanium, tantalum, and tungsten will not be available or counted. We will, however, be using obsidian, stone, bronze, and various other metals, including iron and steel. In addition, take note that the temperatures of the melting points have been rounded for convenience, and none of them actually have numbers this easy to work with. So obsidian melts at around 1650 Fahrenheit, or about 900 Celsius. Because of this low heat resistance, it will fail without question against Firescales. Next is stone. Now, depending on the composition of the stone and where you find it, it just might withstand the higher end of the heat spectrum. Of course, this certainly depends on what the stone is and where it's from, but the ones that I'm currently speaking of can withstand somewhere around 3,000 Fahrenheit, which is also around 1,750 Celsius, which means you could use some kinds of stone against Firescales, but again, certainly not the majority or all of them. Dragons did have bronze in Wings of Fire, so I'm going to test that next. Bronze melts at around the same temperature as obsidian does, so this is also a certain failure. Next up is another common metal, iron. Though it's not really very recognized, iron has a very high melting point, at around 2,800 Fahrenheit, which is basically around 1,550 Celsius. This means that iron might actually work against Firescales dragons. However, Firescales do not have a confirmed temperature, so I could prove wrong. But by my estimations, it could very well work long enough to touch a Firescales dragon for at least a few seconds. Next, we'll check silver, a very valuable metal, still valued in today's age. Now, pure silver melts at around 1750 Fahrenheit, which is about 1,000 Celsius, which is unfortunately 1,000 Fahrenheit shy of my temperature estimations. Now we'll look at gold. After all, what better metal to follow silver than gold? Now, unlike many other metals, gold is extremely malleable, which means it'll bend before it breaks. This means that if you pound gold with a hammer, instead of cracking, it'll simply change its shape. However, this doesn't help its melting point, and pure gold is defeated at 1950 Fahrenheit or 1075 Celsius. We will now take a look at the final metal on this list, steel. Now, for those of you wondering, steel is basically just iron, but it has a small amount of carbon added in to strengthen it. This means that steel can have various amounts of carbon content, so there's no definitive melting point. However, there is the range of 2600 to 2800 degrees Fahrenheit or 1425 to 1550 Celsius. Again, this certainly depends on the amounts of iron and carbon in the steel, but this means that steel may also be able to resist Firescales level just as well as iron. So now we know what dragon tech substances can defeat Firescales degree heat. Some stones, iron, and steel. But what if none of these work? What if Firescales heat is much greater than I anticipated? Then how can we defeat one? I'm glad you asked. And if you didn't, for my sake, pretend you did. Well, we know poison works on Firescales dragons because it's what Scarlet used on Peril to convince her that she needed to eat the coal or whatever those black rocks were for survival. Why is it that I'm suddenly realizing how ridiculous this is? Anyway, Scarlet poisoned a Firescales dragon, and though it was a non-lethal poison, this still proves that it can be used to incapacitate and perhaps possibly kill a Firescales dragon. But if poison isn't quite your style, or you just don't get a chance to use it, you may want to know if there are any fireless spots on a Firescales dragon. Well, just a warning, this section may be a little upsetting to people who aren't okay with hearing pretty violent things. I highly encourage you to leave now if that is the case with you. However, it's not like Wings of Fire is any less violent, so there's that. So first of all, we know that the throat of a Firescales dragon doesn't have fire, because Peril can eat without the food completely burning up. Of course, skywings prefer burning their food anyway, but that's a little irrelevant to the topic. So this means that if you took a spear and jammed it down a Firescales dragon's throat, you would probably kill them. And if they tried to use their fire breath while it was in there, it would melt, which would actually be even worse for them. And they would be super dead. So shoving a spear down a Firescales dragon's throat would actually work surprisingly well. In addition, there is nothing peculiar said about Peril's eyes, other than that they look like the color of the sky, except melted or something like that. And eyes are organs rather than scales, so it is very possible that they too have no Firescales heat. This means that you could also probably defeat a Firescales dragon by getting them in the eye with something ominously sharp, since eyes are always a safe place to aim for lethality in fantasy monsters and real monsters. Also, as a side note, it's probably worth mentioning that Firescales are obsolete underwater. So if you're a sea wing, a mud wing, or just really good at holding your breath like an ice wing, you might actually be able to defeat a Firescales dragon relatively easily if you can lure them underwater. Then again, there's no real reason why they would go underwater, since that's the weakest place for all skywings. So in conclusion, Firescales dragons are formidable warriors and feared across Pyria, and for good reason. But they are not invulnerable and can be defeated and even killed, though it is no easy task. Thank you for watching. Please remember to leave a like, comment about any questions you have or just things you want to say, and subscribe for more Wings of Fire content, and I'll see you in the next video.